In the past decade, several states in Latin America, and specifically the Andean region, renewed their strategies to promote socioeconomic development. Backed by the high world market prices for raw materials, these states implemented new developmentalist policies, raising the hope for sustained economic growth and unprecedented redistribution dynamics. However, with the recent end of the commodity boom and the decreasing state income, the question emerges if the redistribution achievements of the past will last in the years to come. We would like to talk about these issues with Barbara Fritz, Professor of Economics at Freie Universität Berlin. Professor Fritz, what kind of new developmentalist concepts and strategies have been implemented in the past decade in the Andean region?
Thank you. The Andean region is a quite heterogeneous region in terms of development strategies, especially in the last decade. There are the Bolivarian countries like Ecuador and Bolivia, which took a rather left turn to also in their state towards economic policies and social policies, while other countries like Chile and Peru did a much more moderately orthodox conservative policy stance. So we cannot talk about one stance of economic policies or strategies in this region. Let me take these two groups. Bolivia and Ecuador did follow to a certain degree the Venezuelan approach, which was basically to intervene in the distribution of rents of commodities. In the Venezuelan case, which is not an Andean country, but this is the most outstanding, this was a very clear strategy of taking into hands of the state the rents of the oil sector and to redistribute these in channels within forms which had not been seen before. In Ecuador and Bolivia, we can see a similar pattern, not that strongly in terms of intervention of the state and in terms of concentration to this commodity sector. However, the increasing rents from commodity exports played a key role in enhancing the state to invest heavily in infrastructure and in social spending. What we have in these two countries is that the primary structure of the economy did not change that much. The states intended to move away from commodity extraction and exportation, but did not manage that well with that. It's not the only case in South America, but they did not manage well. So redistribution mainly was based on income, based on commodity exports. While Peru and Chile did take a not extreme but moderate stance of orthodox, conventional, conservative policies also in the economic field, giving price stability a high priority, fiscal adjustment and fiscal equilibrium, and fostering the export of non-traditional but still close to commodities or the agrarian primary sector export goods. So what we have first in Chile for a long time already, and now in Peru also increasingly, is a diversification of the export structure a bit away from commodities, but not towards manufacture or high technology goods, but rather a bit less conventional agrarian products. So this is a pattern of two types in the Andean countries.
Okay. Now, you emphasize the diversity between the countries in terms of what strategy has been put forward. When we talk about the redistribution effect or the results of the past decade, can you see also some differences? Are there some countries where the new strategies work better than in others?
Well, we have to rely on data on these issues, which is mainly the Gini coefficient of income distribution and others. And astonishingly, we do not see strikingly different patterns. The first part of the first group of countries which had a very clear, outspoken aim of redistributing income achieved an increase in income justice, in inequality, but the others did too, even if it was not so high on their agenda. So all of these countries could improve their Gini coefficient and could improve their income redistribution. When we believe the official data, Peru has been one of the countries which achieved the highest success rates in terms of Gini reduction. And we do not know really very well why we see these results. In all countries, we seem to have positive effects of an increase of social spending, certainly, and of a redistribution of social spending, but also effects, and this is similar in both cases, or in both groups, impacts of the high commodity prices and the high demand of world market, which decrease poverty and enhanced income inequality. What we also can see is that the Gini reduction has been 4, 5, 6 points from a level of around 50 to a level of around 45, with differences in the region, which is a reduction, but it is not a strong reduction. So despite the differences in terms of development strategies, the reduction is not extremely high, and in all cases, it has not been based on what has been successful in terms of income inequality reduction in the OECD countries. It has not been based on progressive tax reforms. The main issue has been social policies and increasing commodity prices with high growth.
Now, since you mentioned the commodity prices, since 2014, we can see that these prices are decreasing on the world market. So the big question, as I said in the beginning, is what does the decrease and the drop in the world market prices mean right now for these countries and for the success of these new paths when we talk about the development strategies? Do you think that this drop in prices is a high risk for the development that has been achieved in the past years?
It certainly is, even if to different degrees in different manners. When we take the case, for example, of Ecuador and Bolivia, which both have managed to have rather balanced fiscal accounts over this commodity boom, despite increased public spending for social issues and for infrastructure, due to increased income to the public sector from commodities, they have been facing serious problems with the decrease of commodity prices. In Ecuador, for example, the public deficit has been rising to up to 8–9% of GDP, which is something clearly variable, especially in a dollarized economy, which is the case of Ecuador. So here we have serious challenges for the countries which are not very well prepared because they did not achieve a strong degree of diversification of their products and exports in terms of the balance of payments, now facing falling commodity prices. For countries like Peru, it's a bit different because part of their export structure, of their export pattern is not that much dependent on crude commodity prices. By increasingly exporting non-conventional agricultural products like avocado or quinoa or all these fancy products which are very much in demand in the Western countries now, they could escape a little bit from this highly cyclical and volatile price development of commodity prices. So a country like Peru is a bit more protected, and a country like Peru and Bolivia is a bit more protected because they can devalue their exchange rate, while Ecuador cannot even do that as a dollarized country. So some countries are even more in trouble due to the fall of commodity prices than others, but for all of these countries this is a problem.
You mentioned the volatility, and if we sum up against this backdrop, would you say that this process that we can perceive right now demonstrates again that the classical dependency pattern between the Latin American region, of course with the differences, but between the Latin American region and the world market is still working as always?
Things don't always change somehow. So we don't have the same states, the same economies as in the 1950s, where the famous, or the 1940s, where the famous theories of dependence by Raúl Prebisch and others were elaborated. But still, as long as you make your economy very strongly dependent on the earnings of volatile export products and of very few products. And this is still the case in many of these countries. As long as you don't have a very much diversified economy, you are exposed to volatility coming from the global market. And this volatility retranslates into the domestic market by the incapacity of the state to maintain public spending in terms of infrastructure and social spending, and also in terms of the private market. Yes, at the same time, there are some institutions in place which have not been in place in the midst of the 20th century. Pension systems, for example, are an important element nowadays in many Latin American countries to smooth a bit the cycle and to dampen the effect, especially on poorer on the poorer part of the population. So we are not exactly on the same point, but still dependency rules as long as these countries do not have a highly diversified economy or more diversified economy.
You mentioned one keyword that would be the vulnerability, or better say the volatility. I mean, we are talking about a region that displays a strong economic volatility. In how far can we talk in this context about the opportunities to have a sustainable development? On the one hand, volatility, on the other hand, sustainability. Is this a paradox?
It should not be, but it can be. And the way, for example, as Peru found a development strategy to reduce volatility and vulnerability to economic cycles by diversifying its, especially its agricultural production to non-conventional products, at the same time poses high risks in terms of ecological challenges. Let's take the case of avocado, which is a booming export product. So it's not volatile in its price the same manner as copper or oil or whatever. So it's, in this perspective, a much more stable and sustainable product from the macroeconomic balance of payments view. But if you go to regions producing avocado, you will see that this raises not only high conflicts in terms of land use, appropriation of land, the question who is able to appropriate the technology and capital necessary to engage in this kind of export product, but it also raises enormous problems in terms of ecological sustainability. Avocado is a plant which needs enormous amount of water in sensible areas such as the desert on the north of Chile or the Andean regions, which are regions poor in water. So here we have new problems arising, and this shows clearly that only a focus on this kind of strategy, as Peru is trying to follow it, creates new problems which are different but will have long-lasting effects.
Professor Fritz, thank you very much.
Thank you.